George Orwell once said, "A war against a foreign country only happened when the moneyed classes think they can profit from it." Keep this in mind as we discuss today the outcome of the Asia's Premier Security Summit, especially for the meeting between the defense ministers of China and the United States. And what does it mean from a geopolitical and economic perspective? My name is Dr. David Walaloo.
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
And you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
As the world turns, as you know, there is this Asia Premier Summit, Security Summit. And this military officials, diplomats from 40 countries have come together in Singapore. It's called the Shangri-La Dialogue. I love the name.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting.
Highly anticipated, and some of the main players were the Chinese Defense Minister Wei Fenghe and the U.S. Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin.
Yeah.
Big event.
Yeah, well, what was interesting about this, beside the mingling of the military and civilians together, it was the meeting. It was the bilateral meeting or the face-to-face meeting, whatever you want to call it, between the Chinese defense minister and U.S. defense minister, the Secretary of Defense, basically. And that what makes it very interesting. Why? Because the anticipation.
Yeah.
Everybody was sort of, wow, finally the Americans and the Chinese are talking.
You know, this to be contrasted with a recent event in Juneau, Alaska, where there was great animosity and nothing positive came of that at all.
Oh, I remember. We did a video on that.
It was a pretty
awful
awful show.
It was.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to be talking today about, just to provide you a breakdown about what it all means. We will do that on the whiteboard because there are a lot of moving parts, and we're going to simplify it to the best of our abilities just to give you a perspective. Because after all, if you happen to be an American watching this, there will be an impact on all of us here in the US. That's why we're hoping these talks will lead to some sort of an understanding and avoid any catastrophe, shall
It
we
is
say.
at least a dialogue.
At least.
At least. We'll see.
So let me go to the whiteboard and we will provide you some details or breakdown of what it all means. As we said before, we're going to provide you a breakdown of what this meeting between the Secretaries of Defense from both China and the US means within the context of what's going on globally. So, well, first thing, this meeting, as we mentioned earlier, took on the sideline of the Shangri-La Dialogue, known also as IISS. So if you ever hear IISS, that means the Shangri-La Dialogue. So here's the thing. There are about 2 or 3 elements I'm going to focus on. Okay, one of them has to do with the timing of the meeting. Second one has to do with the geopolitics, of course. And third one has to do with regional security. Okay, regional security. And I'm going to detail each one of them separately. So let's talk about the timing of this particular meeting. So why is that important? Yeah. Well, it's important for many, many reasons. We're going to just highlight a few of them to give you an idea. So, of course, from both sides, the United States and China, the timing couldn't be better. For the US, it wanted to, of course, show that it still matters in Asia, because we all know there are some analysts who have been arguing that US influence in the Asian Pacific is kind of diminishing. Others saying no, it's not the case. The other problem with this is that the US wants to make sure that China is not supporting, shall we say, the military operations in Ukraine. That's one from the US side. From China is looking at it, this is the US side, and from China is looking at it in a way that the US statements regarding Taiwan, because literally, and let's not try to sugarcoat it or word it in a way that sounds whatever, let's just say it the way it is. What was the meeting all about? It was about Taiwan, the bottom line to it. Yes, the meeting was cordial. Yes, the meeting took over 30 minutes over its scheduled time, but it was testy. This is unlike what happened, like what Ross mentioned earlier, like what happened in Juneau, Alaska, the first time both countries met. It was contentious. This one is different. However, don't get fooled by niceties, or those are normal settings, shall we say, when you have an official meeting like that. Because each country, China and the US, were posturing. Yeah, they were posturing. I listened to the entire disclosure of the press conference from both the Chinese defense minister and the Pentagon chief. And both of them made it clear that in the case of the US, saying that we're going to have to support Taiwan because the problem with that is that the US is about to sell about $128 million worth of weapons to Taiwan. To China is saying, you know, as we always, and we did mention this couple times, that Taiwan is a red line. And that becomes the question of the timing of it. You know, why was at this time? And this is the why both countries wanted to sort of show that they do stand firmly on their red lines, whatever that red lines is for each country. Okay? The second one has to do with geopolitics. And this one has to do, you know, it's almost like three-dimensional aspects of it. One of them has to do with the global landscape. Well, we all know that there are turmoil in the world right now. You know, of course, the conflicts in Ukraine, now the Europeans' tensions from within, in the United States with Latin America. Africa is moving towards Russia. Middle East, of course, you can't ignore that, with the tensions escalating between Iran and Israel. Could it be a war there, which would not be pretty to begin with, and is going to drag other countries involved? You can just see why the global landscape matters within the context of why those talks between, the bilateral talks between China and the United States are very, very important. Because geopolitically, those two countries matter. And as a matter of fact, there are only three countries that matter in the world as of today. It's Russia, China, and the United States. That's basically it. So for geopolitically speaking, it makes more sense for the two countries to talk. Because the big concern with that, and I speak for myself here, as geopolitical analyst, I would say, I will be very concerned if those two countries did not sit down at some point and talk face to face. Because all it's going to take for things to get out of control is one miscalculation from either party. And that would not be pretty. So we all know what the outcome for that. So from a geopolitical perspective, that's what it means. But also you have to think in terms within the geopolitical landscape as to where things are headed globally. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is the new global system. New global system. And this one ties on so many aspects. I can just mention one of them to give you an idea. You think about the global south, countries in the global south. Most of the countries, if not all, in the global south refuse to sanction Russia, for example. Okay, that's one. You think about it now from a financial aspect that falls within the geopolitical aspect. The financial aspects. We all know that both China and Russia are moving into the direction to dethrone the US dollar. You know, it's no secret, you know. It's just where things are headed. And especially when you start to consider that now countries, some, not all of course, are trading or buying, purchasing Russian oil using their own currencies. And this is the reality that the West does not want to accept. It's almost like living in denial. When you know something is wrong, but you are pretending like it doesn't exist. That's what we call denial. You know, Ross and Elizabeth will be able to detail this much more than I do. The way I understand it from a geopolitical perspective is that this paves the way for other countries to consider bypassing the US dollar altogether, which will be a big blow to the US dominance, financially speaking. You know, I'm sure, I don't know if you noticed that for us in the US, yesterday the stock market just tanked. There's an indication for what lies ahead. And I always get surprised at how much Washington lives in denial, you know, as the saying goes. When Washington doesn't like the message, it tends to shoot the messenger. So the financial aspect, which is, as I always say, is one of the aspects of geopolitics. It's, if you see the direction going that way, then you can see the changes to why it is important for China and the US to talk before it be too late. So, okay. The other element has to do with regional security. Regional security. And this is very, very important. Why is that important, you may ask? Well, when you consider that the Shangri-La dialogue, the Asian Premier Summits, included about 40 countries from the region, or 40 countries total, because I believe the France defense minister attended the event there, because I listened to what he has to say, which French, by the way, France has surprised me, as a side note. Now France is saying we need to support Taiwan, which I find it very laughable. You know why? Because the basic question is, what's in it for a French citizen who's now worrying about the inflation going up? Why would you want to go and worry about Taiwan thousands of miles away? That's why I don't quite get it. I don't understand, but that's their prerogative. Anyway, from a regional security perspective, you're gonna have to think in terms of why is that important? Well, because regional countries, at least Asian countries, including ASEAN, all of them, they were at least excited that now China and the US are talking. Remember, in a couple of videos back then, we said that, mark our word, that ASEAN countries, they want to stay neutral. They don't want to side with any. They know China is their biggest market, okay? But also they know the US is part of what they can count on for security. But as of today, this is where they want to remain, neutral. Because for their own economic welfare, security, and political future. And the way to look at this from a regional countries, you look at, just to give you an example, you look at Philippines, for example. Well, Philippines, with the elections of Marcos Jr., a lot of analysts were asking the question, is he going this direction or that direction? Meaning, is he going with China or is he going with the US? He's going to have to think into them. Those are not easy choices, by the way, guys. You know, we standing here or we on the other side think it's easy. It is not. When you are in that position of making a decision that can impact an entire country, you have to truly know exactly what you're doing. And this is why personally I question some leaders around the world, not all of them of course, but I question the judgment of some of them. They're making decisions without thinking far ahead. And I look at the example of these sanctions on Russia. Did they think about the global impact it's going to have? And again, I'm not being emotional here. I'm talking what's pragmatic to address for us to understand. So regional countries in Asia thinking from that perspective because it's a big concern to them. Because here's the thing, the hard truth, as I always say. If there is a conflict on Taiwan, any country in that region that will host US forces will become a target. That's no secret. It's been known. And now China is making that even clear. So if you were the head of a regional country there, what would you do? And this is why I'm saying those are not easy decisions. They're gonna have to think. You know, Vietnam, Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, all of them. They have to think in this way. So from a regional security, there are more concerns and there are more questions than there are answers. And here is why, from both sides. This is the US. This is China. If you are to analyze or say to yourself, what will be the big concern regionally from a security perspective? It will be the concern that the US went ahead with the establishment of AUKUS, for example, AUKUS, Quads. Small alliances are sending the wrong message to China. China, on the other hand, is moving forward with establishing its own alliance. As a matter of fact, one of the information just came out about China building some naval bases in Cambodia. Can be confirmed, but even if they do, if they have an agreement with Cambodian government, be it. When I was in Phnom Penh, I didn't see any signs at that time, but again, that was a couple of years ago. So the other concern from a regional perspective, it becomes the issue of the US has to do with the buildup of the missile systems that will be through the first chain of islands, or they call them the first island chain. Well, what is the first island chain? It's Taiwan. So you can just see why regionally that's going to be very, very problematic if the US and China do not come to some sort of an understanding. Because what I can tell you, based on the trends that I am seeing happening, for example, with China's announcing the deployments of its Type 003 aircraft carrier. And as a matter of fact, the fourth aircraft carrier is in the process. This is China. With China also moving forward now with Russia, because just recently the Russian president and the Chinese president had a phone call in which they agreed once again to cooperate on three dimensions, or on two segments. One of them is technology, one of them is industry, and one of them is finance. You can just see where it's going, right? The third element has to do with China launching its rocket to space to complete its space station. And what was interesting about that? What's interesting is that Moscow announced that it will wind down its cooperation with the US on the ISS, International Space Station. And Russia will coordinate its efforts with China. So as I always say, geopolitics is not just on Earth. Now geopolitics is moving to space. As an analyst myself, as a former military, I can tell you the military applications to space, it will be tremendous. And this is why it is very important to understand why this meeting was very, very crucial, with the hopes of many thinking that let's hope that the United States and China reach some sort of agreement, not just on the military dimensions, but economics, trade, and other aspects, and maintain stability in the region. We already have enough with what's going on in Europe, and this is the last thing we want to move into, is another conflict with another major power.
Based on your presentation on the whiteboard, what can we really expect? Well, our geopolitical contention is going to continue. What form are they going to take? Well, how about tariffs? How about sanctions? How about further trade wars? How about investment restrictions? How about restrictions in use of technology by foreign countries? And here's the question: what impact is this going to have on your life?
Indeed, that's very important, Ross, because all this, what you just mentioned and what we talked about on the whiteboard, sums up how this is going to impact you. Because here's the thing: any miscalculations, we're all going to pay the price.
Oh boy. And the nations that are involved in this, all 40 of them, many of them came away very excited about the fact that the dialogue is at least cordial.
Yeah.
And some understandings have come from it. And they might have the opportunity to resolve any number of issues among themselves. So was this a plus meeting? It seems likely that it was.
Seems like it, yeah. Because to them, those internal affairs can be resolved without the interference from an outside power.
Oh, I wonder who that foreign power could be.
So, indeed. So, well, that will conclude our video for today. and we look forward to seeing you next time. As always, stay informed. Till next time. Bye-bye.